how the Sabbath is a sign between God and his people. It is a sign. It is a mark of your belonging to him. Anytime you take the Sabbath, you are testifying who your God is. Amen. Without you even opening your mouth, you are testifying that you belong to the Most High. You belong to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That you belong to El Shaddai. That you belong to the Ancient of Days. It is your sign. And if you would go ahead and go to Exodus chapter 31, starting in verse 12. And we're going to read that. Tanisha, if you could read that for me, starting in verse 12 all the way to 14. And I know you got a soft voice, so I need you to speak a little loud, please.
Okay. 12.
Exodus 31, starting in verse 12 to 14, please.
And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak thou also unto the children of Israel, saying, Verily, my Sabbaths ye shall keep. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that ye may know that I am the Lord that does sanctify you. Ye shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy unto you. Everyone that defileth it shall surely be put to death. For whosoever doeth any work therein, that soul shall be cut off from among his people.
Go to verse 15.
6 days may work be done, but in the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whosoever doeth any work in the Sabbath day, he shall surely be put to death.
Verse 16.
Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations, for a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed.
Amen. Amen. So the main thing, one of the things that I want to point out in this, no, Tanish, you talk to us. You talk to us. What did you pull out of that as you were reading?
First, that the Lord himself, he set the example. He created the heavens, the earth, and everything in 7 days, in the 6 days. And the word of God tells us, and he rested and was refreshed.
Right.
So he just is empowering the children of Israel to do as he did. They can work for the 6 days, but the 7th day rest. And not only that, but that he named that Sabbath day to be holy unto him.
Yes.
That it was something that was a sign that we were his. A covenant sign between him and his creation.
That's it? I'll save some for somebody else.
Okay.
Okay. Prophet Tim.
One thing that stood out to me, it says, you shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. This is verse 14, I'm sorry. And it says, everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. So anyone who contaminates or defile the day of the Sabbath should be put to death. So basically, you're killing yourself by not taking that time out to worship. To give God what's due to him.
Yeah, keep on. Stay on the path of defiling. Talk to me about that.
Defile.
What does it mean to defile something?
I guess to alter, to destroy, or defile could be basically you're taking it for granted. You're not using it for what it's supposed to be used for. So instead of its original purpose, you take that opportunity to defile, to alter, to change the purpose of what it was meant to be, and that means that God's not getting the glory. And if we go a little further and take God's a jealous God. So why are we taking away from something that's precious? If we're created to worship him and we're not able to do that, that's a problem.
Amen.
You're not even functioning. That's like if you got a car and it's created to run, it's not running, it's not doing what it's called to do.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's not doing what it's created to do. Valerie, 2 minutes.
In the 6 days, you say, will be done on the 7th day of Sabbath of rest. Meaning that we all should be resting on that Sabbath day. Now, what it says about if we do, he said you shall surely be put to death. I guess that's the same with reference to, what name is the apples. So you shall surely
Spiritual
die.
death, right.
So it just means, that was my word. So,
Andrea?
spiritual death.
I was pulling from it the importance of the Sabbath itself, the day of rest. God, just like how we talk about the tithe, where he only required the 10%, and he got you keep the 90. So he gives you the 6 days to work, but he tells you, give me that one day. And the importance of that one day is not only for your physical rest, but it's also for your spiritual strength. It continues to strengthen the relationship that you have with him. That's how you really get to know him. You get to go more in depth with him because you're setting aside that entire day just for him.
Amen. Philly? While she's doing that, so did you have anything to add? Okay. Apostle?
I'm looking at, read verse 16.
Wherefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations for a perpetual covenant. You go into the one that I was going to go.
And it's the objective to continue or enduring forever. Everlasting, lasting, and indefinite, long term. Continue without intermission or interruption. Ceasing, interpretation, stream of visit all day long without continuing throughout the season of the year. Looking at that, talking about, you want to teach it? Go.
No, I just wanted to hear a couple. Apostle, you got 2 minutes. No, you go ahead.
That was good.
Okay, Felicia, what did you have?
That was mine also. I was thinking about the generations, how the Sabbath is to be kept throughout the generations. That means that's forever. We teach our
That's right.
children and our families forever, and it just keep on going.
Right. It's perpetual. That's what the word, I believe that's what Apostle Webb was going to. The word of perpetual in this sentence, the Hebrew word is olam, which means to keep going. There's no interruption. Olam or perpetual.
You put it out there for them. So when you see it again, they'll know what it means.
What was that in Exodus 31?
Yeah, 31, 16 mean, perpetual mean what? Olam. Is that what you said?
Olam.
Olam. So we give out to people to know what it's like.
So the word perpetual, and the word forever, for us, what does the word forever mean? Is there an end?
No.
There's no end.
So it kind of makes you understand that even in God's kingdom, that there is a Sabbath. That's what the book of Hebrews chapter 4, I believe, talks about. It talks about the Sabbath day's rest. What we have to understand is that we are practicing. We are rehearsing. When the Jews was doing the Passover, they were rehearsing the coming of the Messiah. They didn't understand it then. They didn't understand it, but they just kept doing what they were doing, what God told them to do. So even when we don't understand it, we should what? Just do it. Because believe it or not, we're practicing. We're rehearsing. That's what the word moedim means for festivals, but that's going to a whole nother teaching. It means rehearsals. We're doing dress rehearsals. Even when you go to sleep, you're practicing death. When you wake up, you're practicing the resurrection. So we're always practicing the things that God has told us to do. Amen?
Amen.
So we want to keep, anybody else have anything else to say about, the big thing to me is, it is a sign between God and his people. And I understand that as you begin to learn some things, you can't do it immediately. I understand that. However, if you pray and seek the face of God, He will begin to make that pathway for you. But you have to want it. If you don't want it, there's no pathway. You have to desire to keep His word, to desire to do His will. This is those that love Him. This is the remnant. They desire to do it. God, I'm not able to do that now because I'm working. Or I have to do this. So God, show me how. How can I be a part of this perpetual generational blessing, this perpetual generational sign? I want to be a part of that sign. I want that sign in my life. Okay, and many of you have heard my testimony where I've said, over the past year, I've probably had, I don't know how many jobs, but every job that I went to, whether it was part-time or what have you, I would go and say, hey, I can't work on the Saturday. And guess what? I get it. But I've been walking this for a while because in the beginning, I desired to do His will. I desired to have that mark in my life. So without me ever telling them who I worship, I'm testifying who I worship. Just by saying, matter of fact, just recently, just my personal testimony to see how this thing works. The Passover is coming up. It's April 8th and 9th, and I need to talk to you about that, Katrina, if you can remind me about that. On the 8th and the 9th, well, I put in for it the right way, through the system, and I was denied both days. So I went to my team lead. I said, look, I need these days off. Well, I'll talk to the manager over her. A manager over her said, well, send her to the leaves department. I'm like, okay, fine. So I sent them an email, and I said, these are high holy days for me. I need these days off. Oh, you got it, under religious accommodation. Do you understand what I'm saying, guys? If you desire to keep His commandment, the fourth commandment, He will make a way. But you have to desire it. Because if you think that you're going to lose money on that day, if that's the thing that's going to hold you back, then you don't trust God enough. You don't trust God enough. Well, that's the day I make most of my money, so on and so forth. Watch God double your money, your finances, or whatever it is that you're doing for you keeping that day holy. And it's a commandment that He told us to what? To remember. Because He knew we would what? Forget.
I want to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
One thing that I'm hearing the Spirit of the Lord saying,
Amen.
she's saying that we must desire to keep that day holy unto the Lord. God spoke that also to the children of Israel, saying, greater myself that you shall keep, for all is a sign between me and you throughout your generation, that you will know that I am the Lord, and I sanctify you. Now, one thing that I'm a strong believer, and I need to drop this in your spirit right quickly, and I tried it in 2 minutes. But anyway, I want to try to drop this in your spirit quickly. I believe in teach me, discipline me. Teach me, discipline me. Teach me. God is doing the teaching. Now let's talk about application. Let's talk about the discipline. Now, like I say, we have learned, and I think our mindset is being changed, through the teaching process. So what I think as application, what you need to start doing, what Paul said, present my body as a living sacrifice, holy unto God. So what you do in honor, you may not leap, but we're going to be held accountable. We can't just go through life saying we got this knowledge, then after a while, after time, you start walking in disobedience. But start practicing on Friday. A certain time, I'm just shut things down. Start getting my body prepared, because you got the Jews, you got the Seventh-day Adventists, they shut down after 6 o'clock. It does nothing. Some people does. But you want to start disciplining yourself to slow down. Now, start out with early. If I say, God, I want to walk in the truth of your word, so I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I'm going to go into prayer. I'm going to go into worship. I'm gonna get, cause see, what reality is, and what helped you this day become real, if I can do nothing from 6 to 8, 2 hours on Sunday, Saturday morning, those 2 hours gonna eventually come into the whole day after 6 o'clock. You see what I'm saying? I'm gonna apply this one. Speak to thy children, unto the children of Israel, saying, verily my Sabbath shall be kept. It shall be kept. Now teach me, discipline me. You see what I'm saying? And then you'll find yourself saying, I'm gonna keep the Sabbath. Because I've already, like when we start fasting, God honors the fast. I don't care if it's 15 minutes until fast, God honors it. He knows what you able to do. Amen. It's just like Benny Hinn. He wanted to fast, he wanted to pray like Catherine Coleman. But Catherine Coleman was anointed to pray. But God, and then George Meyer come back and say, hey, I could only do 20 minutes. That didn't say that God didn't have 20 minutes. Some people just gifted. Some people just go right on in. Their desire is greater. So I want you to listen to the teaching and start changing your mindset. Because if you see that you can make it to 2 hours with just giving God that time, you will see yourself going past 6 o'clock when the sun goes down. Or you start on Friday night, start discipline. Is it after 6 o'clock on Friday?
It says sundown.
Sundown.
I just wrote it up there. Sabbath begins sundown Friday and ends sundown on Saturday. It is
Okay.
from even, yeah.
Okay, so our sundown will be what, 7:30 during the summertime? Or is it 6 o'clock?
No, it's not a set time.
Oh, just whenever the sun goes down?
Whenever the sun goes down.
That's when you start.
That's when we start our Sabbath. The Sabbath starts at sundown.
Lately it's been around 7:30.
7:30.
Yeah.
It's about 7:40 now.
And to see the reason I'm not trying to take over teaching, but it's my job as you coming from this set old mindset of coming to church and then what the enemy does, he'll have you sitting there fighting. I can't do this, but the information is good. But I don't see myself ever doing it. I don't see myself saying I'm taking off from his hair. I don't see myself. What I want you all in learning this is to start teach me, to discipline me, how to make that transition. You see what I'm saying? How to fully make that transition. So what you need to do is start practicing it on what? Friday night?
Friday, sundown.
Yeah, and then work your way on to, and that's easy. The getting started part is easy. Because after the sun go down Friday, you ain't going nowhere no way.
Right.
So you just shut down.
Well, now it's real easy because you can't go anywhere anyway.
Yeah, okay, you can start transitioning now. Okay, daughter, go ahead.
Amen. So, there's some other scriptures within the Tanakh or Old Testament that point out, again, how it is a sign between God and us that we are His people. However, I wanted to move to the New Testament because that's where I find that some people struggle about, is the Sabbath still relevant? Even in the New Testament, the Sabbath is still relevant. However, if you don't have a concordance, you won't see that. If you don't look at certain terms in the Greek, what it means in English, then you'll misinterpret some stuff and think, hey, no, it says the first day of the week. That's not what it says. When you read the original letters, that was some of it in Greek. So I want you to go ahead and turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 16, starting at verse 2. And I'm skipping some stuff in the Old Testament because, again, I was just showing, and I did put up the scriptures, just showing how God says that it's a sign. I want to repeat that over and over, how it is a sign between God and His people.
Can you repeat the
Okay.
scripture again, please?
Ma'am?
Can you repeat it again?
Yes, that was 1 Corinthians chapter 16.
I've been looking for this verse.
I know.
Oh,
16 and 2.
Back, 16 verse 2, I'm about to show you something about it.
Go ahead.
Let me pull it up on here, because I need my concordance. And those of you that have a concordance or you're using a Bible app, it's a good time to break that out, because we're about to see some things in this. We're going to start at verse 1. If I can get somebody to read that, verses 1 and 2.
Now concerning collection for the saints, as I have given order to the churches of
Little louder.
Galatia, even so do you. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God has prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come.
Okay, that was verse 1 and 2. All right, let's look at this. We're going to look at this real carefully. Like I said, if you have your Bible app, make sure you're using the King James Version with the concordance in it, because we're going to look at a couple of things. Now, this is one of the verses that the church uses to signify that we don't have to do the Sabbath anymore. It's now passed on to Sunday. But I need you to look at verse 2. It says, upon the first day of the week. Anybody have the Greek word for the word first?
I can get it in 2 seconds.
I got it. I just want you to, it's in Strong's G3391. The word is mia. It does not mean first, it means one. The word one and first is not the same. Because if the number 8, if I put down the numbers 8, 6, 3, what number is first?
8.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean number 1, right?
Right.
All right. So that's what I wanted to show you, but let's go ahead and put down this word. The word first. Because there is no Greek word for the word first. It's number 1. There's no Greek word for the word first. But it translates in the Greek, what I said was G 3391. So you can look this up later if you don't have your concordance with you. And the original meaning is only one. Okay? The second word I want you to look at, it's going to trip you out, is the word week. The word week is G4521. It's going to trip you out. That word means Sabbaton. It's Sabbath. It's not Sunday. We've always been taught from that verse that they're talking about Sunday, the first day of the week. But when you look at it in the Greek, that word week is Sabbath. So it is the first day. It says Sabbaton in So now if I reread this now, it says upon the first day of the week, it says no, upon the first Sabbath. Let every one of you lay by him in store as God has prospered him. It has nothing to do with Sunday. Sunday is nowhere in that verse. But that is what we're taught until you open up your concordance. And at this time, if we're leaders, we certainly should be using lexicons, you know what I'm saying. Yes, we should be using those to further help us with our studies. This was amazing to me when I saw this. And I started asking God, well, what else have we done like this? Because remember, if it's written in Greek, they're not Hebrews. And their mindsets are different. Remember I talked about, I think this was during the covenant study, I taught you the difference between a Hebraic mindset and a Greek mindset. Here in America, we have a Roman Greco mindset. And it is hard to switch to the Greek. Switch to the Hebrew. See that? Mm-hmm. It's hard to switch to the Hebrew mindset, which is more concrete. Mm-hmm. Okay? So, when you had the translators translating, if they were not familiar with the Hebraic background, they're going to interpret it based upon what?
Their mindset.
Their mindset. Versus interpreting upon what was already written or the Hebraic mindset.
Intention.
That's right. So if you go back and you look at church history, you already know that after the fall of the temple, I'm going to give a little church history right here. After the fall of the temple, the Jews were scattered. They had to get out of Rome because they were putting them to death. So all the Gentile being someone that is not in covenant, come on, that's what a Gentile is, not Israel, all the Gentiles took over, and they didn't understand or didn't know their Hebraic history. I hate using the term Jewish because it's so tainted today.
Right.
Because when you think of the word Jewish now, you think of these guys with the long curls on the side, the black hat. No, that's not. Biblical Judaism is different from what you're seeing today. Okay? Following the Torah back then is not the same as following it now. Now it's just religion. Judaism today that you see, the white guys with the hats and all that's religion. And I'm just going to ask you how many white folks you've seen come out of Africa. But I'll leave that alone right now. So, at any rate, this is a very important verse that in Corinthians. Why is it so important? Because this is what the church, the Christian church, has based upon why we hold services on Sunday. And as I stated before, you have to go back and do even more research, and you'll see how Constantine, with the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Church, actually instituted Sunday. Remember we read the last time we were reading from theologians from different Christian denominations, what they said about the Sabbath, and they will tell you, we have no authority to change the Sabbath. The Sabbath was changed according to man. Nowhere in the Bible does it say that God changed the Sabbath. Right? So the Sabbath was not changed. So just looking back at 1 Corinthians 16:1, we know it says it is not talking about the day of Sunday. It is not. That verse has nothing to do with Sunday. Can we say that together? That verse has nothing to do with Sunday. It is talking about the Sabbath. Paul was saying, when I come there on the Sabbath, I'm going to pick up these offerings, make sure it's already ready. Not the Sunday, first day of the
Can I
week.
say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Because, excuse me, I missed something you said, but we need to back.
Yes, ma'am.
But anyway, when I was sitting down with a young lady that she relates, whatever they call, and she brought that verse up, and she evaded to me that upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God had purposed. She was saying that we were in error for gathering together on Sunday.
Right.
She was saying that Paul was saying that the only thing, because Sunday is the beginning, well, according to man, Sunday is the beginning of the week, and weekend is Friday and Saturday.
Right.
She said we only are to come together on Sunday to take care of the affairs of the church, the offering, whatever, but we are not supposed to have any gathering, like calling it Sunday service. That's what she was telling me that, and I was looking for that verse,
Yeah.
asking about that verse.
Yes.
Yeah.
But even that's an error.
Yeah.
Because that verse has nothing to do with a Sunday. That's why I was saying from the very beginning, if they have a concordance, so they can look at the word week. That word week says Sabbath. It has nothing to do with Sunday. So that Sunday is not in that verse at all.
Yeah.
So if she would have just dug a little bit deeper, she scratched, but she needed to scratch a little bit more to really pull up what the actual meaning was being said there. And we were talking about the difference between the Greek mindset and the Hebraic mindset, and how the church lost its thinking, its Hebraic way of thinking about the scriptures and interpreting the scriptures. As a matter of fact, me and Tanisha was doing a study a couple of weeks ago looking at the book of Hebrews. And we was talking about Yeshua being our great high priest, how he is the mediator of the new covenant or the renewed covenant. We went over the word new and renewed in the Old Testament, and we see it's the word kodesh, and it means new or renewed, but they chose to put the word what? New in there versus the word renewed. Okay? So, right, which makes a big difference, doesn't it? It makes a big difference. The covenant is renewed. That's the same thing that he did in with the children of Israel. He renewed the covenant with them. He did not give them a new covenant. He renewed the covenant. And not only that, the book of Hebrews is talking about the priesthood. It's not talking about all of Torah. It said that there would need to be a change within the priesthood. Go back and read it. Me and Tanisha sat down and talked about it. And one of the things I asked her, I said, sis, now, because she's been to Bible college, I know she knows her word, she rightly divides the word. I said, can you rightly interpret the book of Hebrews without understanding the Old Testament? And your answer was? cannot interpret the book of Hebrews, which is a difficult book to understand. However, you cannot interpret that properly without having a firm understanding of what was already written, because it's going to build on that. Amen?
That's right.
Amen. So let's go ahead and look at something else. How much time I got? I got a few more minutes. We're going to go to Acts chapter 15. Anybody have anything to say?
I feel like this is a question for myself, but I also feel like I'm picking up on a few people in the room as well that want to answer the same question.
Okay.
My thing is, because I grasp it, I get it.
Mhm.
The Sabbath is on Saturday.
Yes, sir.
I get that there's Passover, I get that as well. But my thing is this, and I'm asking as a student,
Yes, sir.
Oh,
okay, so, why are we in church on Sunday if the Sabbath is Saturday?
Mhm.
Because that kind of like play with you mentally if you're trying to understand and grasp. Because if you're born and raised, and it's no offense to nobody, but if you brought up a certain way and then somebody tell you something different, you're gonna look at them kind of crazy, like, where you coming from? Because this is what I've been taught, this has been embedded, and it's hard to uproot teachings, you know what I'm saying, that's been embedded into you.
well, see, you know, another thing too, and that's a good question, because our forefathers and ancestors and going back to slavery and all of that, that's what you were taught. You see what I'm saying? Your mindset is not gonna change.
Yeah, traditional men.
Yeah, but yeah,
That's it.
tradition of men, but even at that, that's what you've been taught. You have never been introduced to anything else, you know. Now, some people that veer off and say, and explode and did not limit themselves, and you got the Sabbath keepers, you know, the people that keep, you know, have church on Saturday. But if I don't teach you nothing that's different, see, even with bringing Talisa up and saying, and giving her the liberty to teach what is truth, you know what I'm saying? Now, if I was stuck in my way, was running my church,
Come on, Apostle.
Say it.
then I'm gonna keep you limited to what I know.
Right.
Amen. You know, this is what works for me. You know what I'm saying? So, but if you got a leader that is open,
Amen.
it doesn't take away. I mean, I used to go, my daughter should be saved right now. I had friends that were Sabbath. I would go to church on Saturday. Now, was I going because I just love and have a hunger, fresh out of, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I just wanted to be in the presence of God.
That's right.
I never sat down with my friends and say, hey, why y'all have church on Saturday? I went there and preached at them churches on Saturday.
Amen.
Whatever. But the thing about, I had a hunger and a desire. It didn't matter to me whether it was a Saturday or Sunday.
That's right.
You know what I'm saying? I didn't lock God in. But the thing about it, you held accountable for truth. You know, so the key thing that she said earlier, the desire. You know, you gotta have a desire.